Basically, the science and physics of how things float can be summed up in the principles of buoyancy. The basic law governing buoyancy is the balance between the weight force of an object and the buoyancy force of an object. Essentially, if these two forces are in equilibrium, the object will float. However, if the weight force is greater than the buoyancy force of the object will sink. The weight force of an object is easily calculated. However, finding the buoyancy force requires finding the displaced volume of water. You then take this displaced volume and multiply it by the density of water and the gravitational acceleration. So you can think of buoyancy as a kind of balance between the weight exerted by the displaced water and the weight of the object itself. If we were to place these two on a scale with the object on the left and the displaced water on the right, you could tell whether or not the object would be able to sink or float depending on which way the scale tips. Basically, if the weight of the object is greater than the weight of the fluid, the scale will tip to the left and the object will sink. However, if the weight of the fluid is greater than the weight of the object, then the scale will tip to the right and the object will float. As a more practical example, we can look at many commercial shipping vessels and see why they float. For example, this commercial shipping vessel owned by a Brazilian mining company weighs over 400,000 tons even with an empty hold. Despite this tremendous weight force, this ship does float because of the enormous amount of water that it displaces. As a comparison, you can see the ship on the left, the red band surrounding the bottom of the ship is barely visible, indicating that the cargo hold is full, whereas the ship on the right has a fully visible red band, indicating that the cargo hold is actually empty. You can get a real feel for how much water is displaced by the difference in these two pictures. As another example, flotation devices at pools follow the same principle. As another example, a pool noodle has a very high volume, so it displaces quite a bit of water, but it has an extremely low weight force. Because of this drastic difference between the weight force of a pool noodle being very low and the volume displaced being very high, a pool noodle is a very good device to help somebody float. In the same regard, an inner tube displaces a very large amount of water, yet it has an extremely low weight because of all the air inside of it. This is the reason why an inner tube is so hard to pull underwater, yet it's an extremely good flotation device, as we can see.